I asked Terry Tanner if it was okay to do any substitutions on this nymph, and he said no. He said that Dave Whitlock called it a fox squirrel nymph, so then if you don't use fox squirrel, then it's not a fox squirrel nymph. And he's got a point, I suppose, although it's interesting to read Dave Whitlock's commentary on this fly, where he was actually substituting and using fox squirrel instead of whatever the original material on a particular nymph he was tying was supposed to be when he came up with this nymph. Dave Whitlock says that if he could only have one fly, this would be it, although he ties it in a number of different configurations. So in a way, it's kind of more than just one kind of fly, I suppose. I'm tying it on a 3X number 14 curved shank hook. He ties it anywhere from, I think, a 10 down to a 20. Put some lead on it, as a nymph ought to have, although you can weight your nymph depending on how deep you want it to fish. The tail on this fly is a few fibers off of the back of a fox squirrel. Pull out all the junk from the bottom of that, although it's okay to have some in there. And then just wrap up around that and create a little tail. It's not as long as the shank, but I think that looks pretty good. And then once that's wrapped in, I'm going to wrap in a gold wire. And Whitlock says that the wire is less for segmentation than it is for color, to add just a little bit of what he calls translucency to it. The body of the fly then is the belly hairs off of a fox squirrel, and they look like this. They are red or orange. I don't know what you call that, red orange. Which does also then bring up a possibility for substituting that Whitlock suggests, that if you don't have fox squirrel, you could dye some gray squirrel to that color and use that. The body is also mixed with some other dubbing, artificial or other furs, and something that's got a little bit of sparkle in it. So I've got this dubbing that I'm using to mix with the fox squirrel belly hair, put a tapered body on it, about half or 2/3 of the body of the hook shank, and then go ahead and I'm going to counter wrap my wire. Whitlock doesn't say to do that, but it's kind of a standard practice that I've developed when I do dubbing, is to counter wrap my wire or my rib, that way it doesn't fall between the cracks in the direction of the dubbing. So some wraps over the top of that wire, a few underneath to catch it in, and then I'll helicopter that off. I'm going to clip that one long stray off the top there. Then there's a thorax on this, and it is also fibers off the back of the squirrel, fox squirrel. This one, I'm plucking them to get the down underneath of it, as well as the guard hairs. So dub that on for the thorax, and then those guard hairs actually act like legs or whatever you want on the thorax of a nymph. Get that onto the... It doesn't like to dub real well. When you work at it a little bit, it'll work out. Oh yeah, I can just pull that extra stuff off of there. And you can see there's some fibers sticking out. Now on this size of hook, you could just wrap the head and it would be done. Although on some of his larger flies, he uses a partridge feather. So get one of these. So the partridge feather, and what I'm going to do, strip off all the fuzz from the bottom of the feather. I'm going to take all of the fibers off of what would be the top side as I lay the point, the tip of the feather at the hook eye. I'm going to leave a little bit out in front there for my triangle and pull those all off because it is a very sparse front hackle. Whitlock suggests 6 to 12 fibers, and he actually trims out the fibers so that he doesn't have any more than that on the front hackle. So I've just grabbed the tip with my hackle plier and pulled everything else back. Clip that, so all I have is that little tiny triangle, and I'm going to hold it with that triangle down across the shank and then wrap up over that end. I've got some fibers sticking out here. I may have to trim those out. I'll grab that feather with my hackle plier, and one turn is what he says is all you need. And I'm going to do, forgive me Dave, I'm going to do 2 turns on that hackle feather. I still don't think I've got more than 6 or 8 fibers, particularly since I trimmed off the one side of them. Then I can just wet my thumb and finger, pull all of that back and wrap up over that and create the head on that. And then I can grab that stem, put some tension on my thread and try to snap it out. I like to snap it out if I can. There we go. And then I'll put a whip finish on that. I'm going to head cement that so I don't need too many wraps on the whip finish. The head cement that I use is a diluted Goop. I just stick a needle in my jar, get a drop that on the head, and then I like to pass a hackle feather through the eye of the hook just to make sure that it's clean. If I can find the eye of the hook. There we go. The fox squirrel nymph, actually using fox squirrel if you can source it, from Dave Whitlock, and I'll put a link also in the description to his description and conversation about this fly.